Okay, so this is the 6th video for the Jagdpanther Tank Destroyer. And we're going to create detailing for the gun platform or gun base. You're going to need, if you have one, as before when I was making the gun I used a thicker skewer. If you have a smaller skewer, those actually work a little bit better for this. And basically you just take a scraper blade and estimate halfway. Now sometimes there's going to be some broken or split skewers in your packages, or ones with one poor side. You can always use those ones, and you just want to kind of, usually you can slip under the grain and pretty much just split it in half all the way down, depending on how straight the grain on the skewer that you select is. But anyways, you want to strip it so that it's slightly less than half, or half at most. So I've got a couple here that are already stripped down. And you want to take the pieces that you've got made and kind of, I like to do the lower ones first, but it doesn't really matter where you start. And just kind of cut a 45-degree angle into one side, and then lay it across the template and just mark where the next one is. Now just estimate the 45s. If it's pretty hard to get them all correct, and so your pieces match up nicely, but you can actually fill gaps and stuff like that later with modeling clay. So do try to get nice 45s, but don't worry if they're a little bit off. So do one for the top and one for the bottom. And I just mark the inside corner and then estimate a 45 from there. Or you can use the other piece that you already made, which is a nice way to get two really nicely matching ones. Kind of lay it against your example and then cut exactly the same sort of wedge shape. That's a good way to make them. And then make your sides. So it's the same exact way to make the sides. Just lay it on there, mark it, and cut it. You're going to need 2 of each for each vehicle. So once you've got those pieces, actually, before cutting them, should have mentioned this, it's good to sand the skewer down, even actually before splitting it, just to make it a little bit nicer, easier to round. So once you've got those cut, I always put the bottom in first, because you have to make sure that it's cresting enough to sort of hide this transition, but you don't want it cresting so much that it interferes with the gun. So if any other pieces are going to be out of place, this one shouldn't be. It's the most important to get correct. Then you lay the sides on. Now you may want to actually test and look and see if they're going to fit nicely. But I've done this a lot of times, so I'm pretty sure it should go together fairly well. And just press them in so that you can see that it's just a little bit over the sides that you built in here, or at the very least flush with it. you don't want to be able to see any cardboard of this ridge here. So once you have your sides in place, you want to fairly quickly try to get the top in before these glue permanently and you can't change anything. So if you've got gaps, just try to even up the gaps, and if you need to, pull something out and trim it down. That's fine too. And try to get these, like these are meeting up really nicely on this one. I'm actually shocked how nice of 45s I must have cut. But usually there's a little bit to fix. Now, if they're this nice, you can fix them with just layers of glue. But sometimes if there's fairly large gaps, you want to take a piece of modeling clay, just like work it into your hands until it's super, super soft. Wait until everything's dried. And actually a good policy after things have dried is to kind of sand down these connections a little bit. You may actually be able to get them a little bit nicer with just sandpaper. And it also evens out, like if one of these is a little bit thicker than another, you'll even that out. So one thing you want to be sure of while you're doing this is you're kind of using either exactly the same split piece for the whole, all four, or else really careful about having the same width if you're using parts from another skewer. So get those sanded nicely, and then you can kind of press this stuff into the gaps. And actually a good policy is to sort of wet you where you want this stuff to stay. Wet with 2-to-1 glue, yeah, watery glue. Let it dry till it's tacky, and then press this stuff into the gaps. Now, again, I didn't get very many gaps on this one. If you try to use more than half or the full half of the skewer rather than closer to, say, 2/5 of it, which is actually what I recommend, is a little bit less than half, then those gaps would usually be a little bit harder to fill and more obvious. So that may come up. But this gets you some detailing for the exit of the gun, and it's a lot easier to install it before installing the gun. So hopefully you get through this, and meet me in the next video. Thanks for watching. See you soon.